Faith begins with a clear vision of what God has promised. Dr. David Yonggi Cho taught that before anything can change in your life, you must first see it in your spirit. Many people want miracles, success, or breakthrough, but they have no clear picture of what they are believing for. Faith is not blind hope. It is focused belief. When God gives a promise through His Word, that promise must become a vision in your heart. You must be able to imagine it, embrace it, and hold on to it, even when reality says otherwise. Vision gives faith direction. Without vision, faith becomes weak and unstable because it has nothing specific to aim toward. Dr. Cho often explained that God works through people who can see beyond their present condition. When you see yourself healed, restored, successful, or transformed according to God's promise, your faith becomes alive. This inner picture begins to shape your thoughts, your prayers, and your decisions. What you consistently see on the inside eventually influences what happens on the outside. A clear vision also protects faith from discouragement. Life is filled with delays, opposition, and moments where nothing seems to change. In those times, vision reminds you of what God has already spoken. Dr. Cho taught that circumstances are temporary, but God's promises are permanent. When you hold on to the vision God has given you, you are able to stand firm even when emotions waver. Vision becomes an anchor for faith, keeping it steady during storms. Faith with vision also brings alignment between the heart and the mind. Many people believe God's promises intellectually but fail to accept them emotionally. Vision bridges that gap. When you see yourself walking in God's promise, your heart begins to agree with what your mind believes. This agreement releases faith at a deeper level. Dr. Cho emphasized that faith flows most powerfully when belief is not forced, but naturally formed through vision. Ultimately, faith that begins with vision prepares the way for action. When you clearly see what God has promised, you start to live differently. Your choices reflect expectation, not fear. Your prayers become confident instead of desperate. Your attitude shifts from doubt to anticipation. According to Dr. David Yonggi Cho, this is where faith truly begins, when God's promise becomes your personal vision, strong enough to shape your life until the dream becomes reality. Faith grows stronger when it is expressed through words. Dr. David Yonggi Cho consistently taught that spoken words are not neutral. They carry spiritual power that can either build faith or destroy it. Many people believe in God's promises but cancel their faith through negative speech. When words of fear, doubt, and defeat are spoken repeatedly, they shape the inner world and weaken belief. Faith, on the other hand, is released and strengthened when God's word is spoken out loud with conviction. Speaking faith is an act of agreement with God. When you declare what God has promised, you are aligning your voice with His truth, even if circumstances appear opposite. Dr. Cho emphasized that faith does not wait for evidence before speaking. It speaks first, believing that what God has said is already true. This kind of confession trains the heart to trust God rather than react emotionally to situations. Over time, your words begin to reshape your mindset, replacing fear with confidence and hope. Words also influence the spiritual atmosphere around you. Dr. Cho taught that faith-filled words invite God's power into everyday life. Just as negative words can attract discouragement and defeat, positive, faith-based declarations open the door for peace, strength, and expectation. When you consistently speak life, healing, provision, and victory according to God's word, your environment begins to change. People around you are affected, and even your own emotions start to respond differently. Confession of faith requires discipline, especially during difficult seasons. When problems increase, the natural response is to complain or speak despair. Dr. Cho taught that this is the exact moment when faith must speak the loudest. Declaring God's promises in hard times is not denial of reality. It is a declaration of a higher truth. By choosing faith-filled words over negative speech, you are training your spirit to lead instead of allowing circumstances to control your emotions. Over time, consistent confession builds inner strength. Faith grows as you hear yourself speaking God's word repeatedly. Dr. Cho explained that faith comes by hearing, and that includes hearing your own voice declare God's promises. This repetition deepens belief, sharpens vision, and fuels perseverance. Eventually, faith-filled words stop feeling forced and become natural. According to Dr. David Yonggi Cho, when faith is spoken daily with belief and persistence, it becomes a powerful force that moves dreams closer to reality. Faith is proven and strengthened through persistence, especially when results are delayed. Dr. David Yonggi Cho taught that many people begin with strong faith, but give up too soon because they expect immediate change. True faith is not measured by how confidently you start, but by how faithfully you continue. When prayers seem unanswered and progress appears slow, persistence becomes the evidence that faith is still alive. Delays are not signs of failure. They are often part of God's process. Dr. Cho explained that God works in stages, shaping character, deepening trust, and preparing the believer to receive what has been promised. During this waiting period, faith is refined. It moves from excitement to endurance, from emotion to conviction. Those who persist through delays learn to trust God not just for outcomes, but for guidance and strength in the journey itself. Persistence in faith requires resisting discouragement. Challenges, criticism, and personal doubt will attempt to weaken belief. Dr. Cho emphasized that the enemy of faith often uses time as a weapon, whispering that nothing is happening or that God has forgotten. In these moments, faith must be intentional, returning to God's word, reaffirming the vision, and continuing to pray are acts of spiritual strength. Persistence keeps faith active even when emotions are exhausted. Continued obedience is another expression of persistent faith. Dr. Cho taught that faith is not passive waiting but active trust. Even when results are unseen, obedience demonstrates confidence in God's promise. Showing up, serving, giving, and believing despite lack of evidence reveals mature faith. This kind of faith does not depend on visible success, but on unwavering trust in God's faithfulness. In time, persistence produces breakthrough. Dr. Cho often shared that the greatest miracles occur after the longest periods of waiting. When faith refuses to quit, it eventually intersects with God's timing. What once felt impossible becomes reality, not because of human effort, but because faith endured. According to Dr. David Yonggi Cho, dreams turn into reality when faith remains steady, patient, and unshaken until God's promise is fulfilled. Faith must move beyond belief and become action. Dr. David Yonggi Cho taught that genuine faith always produces steps of obedience, even when those steps feel small or risky. Many people say they believe God, but their actions do not reflect that belief. Faith is not proven by words alone. It is demonstrated through choices, behavior, and obedience. When faith is real, it naturally leads a person to act in alignment with God's promises. Taking action in faith often requires courage. Dr. Cho emphasized that faith-based action usually comes before visible results. This means stepping forward without guarantees, trusting that God will meet you in your obedience. Whether it is starting something new, letting go of fear, forgiving someone, or committing to a vision, these actions activate faith. Action signals to God that you are serious about what you believe and ready to cooperate with His work. Small acts of obedience can lead to great transformation. Dr. Cho taught that God often uses simple steps to produce powerful outcomes. Faith does not always demand dramatic gestures. It requires consistent obedience in daily life. Speaking kindly, praying faithfully, giving generously, and serving humbly are actions that release God's power over time. When these actions are rooted in faith, they create momentum that moves dreams closer to reality. Faith-filled action also reshapes identity. When you act in faith, you begin to see yourself differently. Fear loses its control, and confidence grows. Dr. Cho explained that obedience strengthens faith because it provides personal evidence that God is working through you. Each step of faith reinforces trust, making future steps easier and more natural. Action becomes a pathway through which faith matures. Ultimately, faith that acts opens the door for God to work supernaturally. Dr. David Yonggi Cho taught that God responds to obedient faith with provision, guidance, and breakthrough. While belief connects you to God's promise, action allows that promise to move into reality. When faith and action work together, dreams are no longer distant hopes. They become unfolding testimonies of God's power and faithfulness. Faith reaches its fullest expression when it is grounded in a deep, personal relationship with God. Dr. David Yonggi Cho taught that faith is not a technique or formula. It is the natural result of intimacy with God. Many people try to use faith as a tool to get results, but true faith grows out of trust, love, and daily communion with God. When you know God personally, believing Him becomes natural, even in difficult circumstances. A strong relationship with God develops through consistent prayer and time in His presence. Dr. Cho emphasized prayer not as a religious duty, but as a living conversation with God. Through prayer, faith is refreshed, fear is quieted, and direction becomes clear. In God's presence, doubts lose their power, and confidence is restored. This connection sustains faith when external support fades and circumstances become overwhelming. Trust deepens through obedience and experience. As believers walk with God and see His faithfulness over time, faith becomes steady and mature. Dr. Cho taught that past testimonies are fuel for present faith. Remembering how God has answered prayers before builds confidence to trust Him again. This ongoing relationship transforms faith from a momentary belief into a lifelong lifestyle. A close relationship with God also brings peace during uncertainty. Dr. Cho explained that faith is not the absence of problems but the presence of assurance. When you walk closely with God, you learn to rest in His control even when outcomes are unclear. This peace guards the heart from anxiety and keeps faith from collapsing under pressure. Instead of striving, faith learns to rely. Ultimately, faith rooted in relationship produces lasting transformation. Dr. David Yonggi Cho taught that dreams turn into reality not through effort alone, but through alignment with God's will. When faith flows from a deep connection with God, life is changed from the inside out. Vision becomes clearer, obedience becomes joyful, and hope remains unshaken. This kind of faith does not just achieve dreams, it builds a life grounded in purpose, peace, and divine direction.